Welcome to The Landscape, a podcast to shed light on the people, programs, and businesses that are changing the landscape for individuals with any type of disability. I'm your host, Nave Eldar. Today you will hear a conversation with Susie Rutkowski, a co-founder of ProjectSEARCH, which is an internship program for high school seniors who have an intellectual or developmental disability, where instead of going into the classroom, they spend a year learning and working at some of the largest employers in their communities. The conversation starts with Susie giving us an overview of the program. Stick around after the conversation to get some additional information about ProjectSEARCH.
ProjectSEARCH is a training immersion program for young adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So think of it as a language immersion program when you really want to learn something and you have to be immersed in that culture or in that situation or in that society or in that country. So young people with disabilities, many of them have not had good introductions and opportunities to learn about work. So this is a way for young adults in their last year of high school or as young adults who have graduated to experience work from the inside out, to be inside a major company, quality company in their community and spend a 7-hour day in that organization learning not just the work, but the culture, the values, the mission, the expectations, the productivity, the quality, the safety, all of that, what to wear, so that they can really get up to standards of working and work up to high expectations that a typical large employer in their community would have. So the young people get to spend an entire year, an entire academic year at that host business, at the same host business, and get to experience 3 different entry-level jobs with 3 different managers, 3 different sets of coworkers, to try to figure out what do they want to do, what are they good at, what do they like, and then learning those tasks up to productivity, quality, and safety standards.
So I imagine that's why it has to be large businesses, because there has to be three rotations. You're trying to teach like culture of business. So do you have a standard for how big that business needs to be? We
say at kind of the threshold that it has to have 200 employees.
Okay.
And it has to have a variety of tasks. So when we think about like a hospital is sort of the kind of gold standard for ProjectSEARCH not because it's healthcare, but because of the wide variety of tasks that there are in a hospital.
Right.
So it has everything from food service and traditional environmental services up to prepping for surgery. So entry-level tasks at a hospital could still be building case carts, building the clinical sterilization trays that go to a surgeon. And they're all done by an entry-level person that could learn to set that case tray in a very specific manner.
And so what does an ideal intern look like?
Could be a variety. So it could be a young person with autism. It could be a young person with Down syndrome. It could be a young person that has complex medical needs, as well as maybe is a non-reader. So we say that they have to be, if they're still in high school, they have to be on an IEP. They have to be on an individual education plan. Or if they're a young adult, they have to have a documented disability that would qualify them for state vocational rehabilitation. So they have to have some barrier to work. So maybe they've never had a job, or maybe they've had several jobs but lost them. Maybe they have an intellectual disability, but they also might have a compounding factor, such as poverty or homelessness or mental illness. So mostly if we think about training for work, and we ask ourselves the question, does that young person need a year of internship experience and career exploration? And if we can say yes, they would benefit from that, then they would be a good candidate.
Now, I know that you have a fidelity that goes with the program. You don't have to go over the whole fidelity. But 2 questions. One, when did you implement that? And what are some of the really key parts of your fidelity?
We've had Fidelity for probably at least 10 years. We're a program that's 20 years old. But we really recognized 10 or 12 years ago that there were a lot of ProjectSEARCH-like programs around, and we wanted to say to ourselves, what makes us different? What makes us unique? And so we have exactly 6 core model Fidelity components. And the first one is the most important. It's that our outcome is employment. So we're different than other transition programs because everything that feeds into our whole day has to relate back to, is this activity, this lesson, this internship, this task, this whatever the intern is doing, can we answer the question, does this lead to a better outcome of employment? And if we can answer yes, then we should be doing it. So do our teachers take field trips? No. They might go visit an employer. They might go visit the Chamber of Commerce. But everything that every ProjectSEARCH program should be doing should lead back to employment. So that's our first core model, Fidelity Employment, is that we want every intern to gain employment at 16 hours a week or more, minimum wage or better. The second is collaboration. So collaboration is hard. Anybody that's in any kind of relationship know that relationships mean work. So every ProjectSEARCH program collaborates with the host business, an education partner, a supported employment partner, state vocational rehab, and long-term support services for people with disabilities. So that's 5 partners that have to work together day in and day out,
right,
and ensure that the intern is getting what they need to reach the goal of employment. The other really important factor is what you asked, is who makes a good ProjectSEARCH candidate. Students have to apply, but again, they have to be on an IEP, they have to have a documented disability, they have to be eligible for state vocational rehab, and they have to be able to benefit from this intensive year of internship opportunities.
Full disclosure for the listeners that I am involved with ProjectSEARCH at my company. And so this is something, everything you're talking about is changing the lives of the interns, right? It's exposing them to jobs that they probably wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise. But did you also, in the beginning, think about the fact that you're changing the culture of businesses themselves?
Well, we did, because it started at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. So Erin Riley, who was the emergency room director from the nursing perspective, so there's a physician director and a nursing director, and Erin was a nursing director. And she knew that half of our population at Cincinnati Children's are children with disabilities. And she knew that we did a great job of treating them and healing them, but that we didn't do much beyond that. And she looked at all the training programs that Cincinnati Children's offered for doctors and nurses and physical therapists and occupational therapists and child life therapists, but there weren't any training programs for the very people that we served. And so she reached out to the school where I was the special ed director to say, what could we do to change this? And so we reached out to State VR and some other key organizations in the Cincinnati area to form the very first program. And we hoped that it changed the culture. We didn't know for sure. Part of the biggest challenge was expectations. So helping people realize that people with disabilities can do real work.
Right.
For so long, if you think about the history of people with disabilities, that people believe that they could be productive, but not in the same way as typical people. I mean, I'm being sarcastic, but most people would never say, well, a person with a disability could have the same productivity rate as somebody else. So we often gave people with disabilities grunt work or busy work to do. And that our goal was to change that. Our goal was to change that for employers. And I think that was one of the hardest things, is for managers in very important departments to say, wow, I'm giving this really important work to a person with a developmental disability and trusting them that they can get this work done. So that we as disability professionals have to set up systems where our young people can be productive and produce quality work, because oftentimes the work that they're doing is very, very life or death, like putting together a surgical tray.
Right.
You want that surgeon to have the instruments that he or she needs. And so it's the training piece, it's the high expectations, it's finding ways that managers and mentors can feel comfortable with people with disabilities, that they don't feel scared to work alongside someone with a disability, and that they feel that they have the tools to teach. So it's teaching the managers and mentors how to train and how to mentor someone along in a job. So it can be very, very rewarding, but it can also be challenging for everybody.
And it is absolutely one of the things that I love about the program. And I have been exposed to many a program over my career, and ProjectSEARCH is absolutely one of my favorites. And because I understand that in order for us to make progress for individuals with disabilities in the workplace, there has to be work on both ends. There has to be work on the individuals themselves getting the proper training, right, which this program does. But then you also have to have employers that are willing to hire them, which this also addresses. And another component of it is you also have, as part of this, a recommendation of having a business advisory committee, which is where the host business, in my case, it would be Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, reach out to other businesses in the community to bring them in. So can you talk a little bit about what is the purpose of reaching out to other businesses in the community if you're hosting interns?
So we're looking for those other employers in the community that would have jobs that would require similar skill sets to the interns are learning. So it wouldn't have to be insurance to insurance,
right,
but it would have to be, what are the interns learning and what do the other employers need, and do those match up? So anybody so if we're learning clerical, admin, spreadsheet, that kind of work, who else does that? If they're learning stocking, materials management, logistics, who else does that? And we're not asking the Business Advisory Council to hire everyone. What we're asking them is, can you help us create employment opportunities? Can you reach out to someone that you know that might help create an opportunity? Not even to hire, but can you give them an interview?
Right.
Can you help us find ways for employers to say yes? Or can you do things like critique their resumes? Can you help us create maybe a visual resume or a video resume? Can you do mock interviews? Can you give us, sometimes we get too close to the interns, if you know what I mean, and we might allow things because we see them every day, whereas another employer might say, oh, this young person needs to dress up more, or have better articulation skills, or know how to talk about their skills to an employer, or to help them get that good job. So we need those local businesses to give us good advice, even on what we should be teaching. If we're teaching old skills that aren't necessary, we need to know that. So it's advice, opportunities, opening doors, all of those things would be things that we need local employers to help us with.
So one ProjectSEARCH site, right, one business, which is changing internally, right? Because like I said, our program has been up. This is our second year now. And in the first year we had 7 intern departments, internships available. And then the other departments saw how wonderful they were doing. And so they wanted, so now we're up to 17, right? So you see this change within the company. And now we're also bringing in outside companies. And so it's impacting greater Chattanooga. Like I said, when I sit back and think about the program, I'm just like, I wonder, like, do you understand how big of an impact something that you co-created is having on society in general?
It's really mind-boggling, and it kind of does like challenge your brain every day. Erin and I pinch ourselves. We just filled out an application to go to India and present at an international conference. Just knowing that we have 614 sites as of today and in 10 different countries. But I think for us, when we first started, it was schools that would call us to say we want a new ProjectSEARCH program. And then it was community rehabilitation programs that said we want one. And now it's companies. So Blue Cross contacted us. We didn't contact them. You contacted us. Right? Now we have the Dow Chemical Company calling us. I was just in Louisiana last month training a new Dow site. We have 5 Dow chemical sites in different states and one in Wales. So when you have companies like the Dow Chemical Company and Blue Cross Blue Shield and famous hospitals like the Cleveland Clinic, and I mean, it's very humbling to know that those companies want to diversify and have people with disabilities in their ranks. And that's so refreshing, but also humbling to think about. Because if the Dow Chemical, like a global company like that, is reaching out, then it's super exciting.
Let's go back then. So right now we see where it's at. You're in 10 different countries. You're 47 states. Is that correct?
48, yeah.
48 states. Several sites in all of the states. We'll get into some of the numbers a little later, but it began in 1996, right, at the Children's Hospital in Cincinnati. I am just really fascinated to know, when Erin came to you, how did you even have the audacity to go to vocational rehabilitation and all these entities that you mentioned earlier to pitch this ideal that nobody had ever heard of?
So the first year we struggled because we tried just what people call the place and train model, right? We put somebody in a job and gave them a little bit of training and hope it worked. And it worked okay. But what we really found quickly is that just like you and I, people need training for a job. And you can't just put somebody in a job and say, Nave, good luck.
Right.
And so we thought about, well, we kind of combined what we do in career tech with training and what nurses do. So Erin knew nursing and I knew education. And so we kind of combined that stuff together to say, well, nurses go through an intensive internship experience in different areas.
Okay.
And students with disabilities need immersed work. They don't do well in a lab environment. So can we bring them to the hospital? Can we create internships at the hospital? So we took both of our experiences and blended them together. Our school had worked with state vocational rehab anyway. We were a CARF accredited school and training organization. So we knew some local VR people. And so we brought some local people together. And it was both positive and negative. It was negative in the fact that there was some jealousy with other community rehab organizations. It's like, well, why do you get to work with Children's Hospital? We want to work with Children's Hospital.
Got you.
And Children's was very adamant that they had the right to choose the partners that they wanted and that they felt comfortable with. But there was some give and take for a while. Once we kind of thought about what that internship experience needed to look like from the hospital's end and from the student end, it was pretty, I wouldn't say easy, but it was easier then to put the program together. And Erin had so many contacts at the hospital. She was a senior director. She knew lots and lots of people. And from the rehab end, I knew more people like in the community. So she reached out to so many departments at the hospital. Not everybody said yes, but so many people said yes.
Yes.
And we were really able to have some fairly prestigious departments that wanted to work with us. And that I think a lot of people from a personal point of view either had a child or a relative or maybe a patient that they knew with a disability that wanted to say yes. And then we actually, our first class, our first Project Search cohort started in the 98-99 school year. So for about a year and a half, we tried the other way. And then finally it took us about a year to reach out to different departments and put together a curriculum and all of that and recruit students. And so it was that 98-99 school year when we first started the way it kind of looks now. It looks different. We didn't have a dedicated classroom the first year, and we used the third shift break room because they were off. And so we were creative, but it's interesting. A couple of the students from our very first year are still at the hospital working.
Oh, wow.
So they've been there 20 years.
Wow.
So some of them are starting to talk about retirement, which is
so
great. Phenomenal, right?
Exactly.
Like, who would have ever thought we'd be talking about 401k plans and, all that crazy stuff. But so we reached out to State Voc Rehab in Ohio and talked about a common definition of employment. That was one of our first goals, is to say, if we reach our outcome, you measure employment this way and the school measures it this way. Mm-hmm. How can we come to a common definition so that our data looks similar and that our outcomes are similar and that we're all happy at the end of the year? What's gonna be our measure of success? We needed that. We had to do a lot of work with the hospital to make sure that students were safe, students were productive, students produced quality work, that it wasn't just, a little bit of work here and there, that they were really looking at entry-level kinds of jobs. That was, I think, difficult for everybody, mm-hmm. because I think a lot of people thought, well, I'm just going to give them a little bit of this work or that work. It's like, no, we have to look at, what are some competitive tasks that they have to learn? They weren't going to be doing the full job, but they were going to be learning competitive tasks. So that took a lot of work on all of our parts to think about what that would look like. And then just to get people's head wrapped around that you'd have the intern for about 25 hours a week. So what does that look like if you have a nursing student in your department? It would be similar. Mm-hmm. But they wouldn't, it would be a young person with a disability, not a nurse. So again, just different high expectations, but different. And giving them training. And then our first foray out of the hospital was to a bank, to a Fifth Third Bank in Cincinnati. Okay. And that was different again because it wasn't hospital work. It was kind of clerical admin work.
So how did that happen? Did you approach the bank? Did somebody hear about it and say, I want to be involved? How did that happen?
The bank approached us. So we had some students working at another bank in Cincinnati, just doing some work. And that bank got bought by another bank, okay, as banks do. And a lot of the people at the original bank moved to Fifth Third. And Fifth Third said, oh, we had this great experience with students with disabilities. Let's reach out. And so...
So they were graduates of the Project Search at the hospital that were working at the bank?
No, we were doing some other placements.
Got you.
And so we said, and then Erin and I met with leadership at Fifth Third and said, if we're going to do this together, here's our expectations. You have to have internships. You have to, have quality internships. You have to be flexible and, accept all the things that we needed. And they were so gracious and excited and accepting and built a beautiful classroom and helped reach out to lots of departments. And now we actually have 3 sites at Fifth Third, 2 in Cincinnati and 1 in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
When did that put the seed that we can spread this? Like, this can go, I know you didn't think international at the time, but you were like, this can spread to other states maybe.
Well, at first we thought other industry sectors because we were only in healthcare. And we had done another couple hospitals in Ohio. And once we did Fifth Third, we thought, well, wow, if this could work in a bank and it can work in a hospital, well, it could work in any industry sector that's large enough to host 8 to 12 interns every year and have 8 to 10 internship opportunities every year. Because the whole thought is that every intern gets their own department. They don't move as a group. They move throughout the organization on their own with staffing support. And I think that's the other thing that makes us unique from other transition work programs is that we have embedded staff at every host business that we're in. So if you think about 614 sites, we also have 614 ProjectSEARCH instructors, 2 skills trainers at every site. We don't hire them, the local teams do, but we want businesses to know that we're not just going to drop off these interns. We're going to give you embedded, immersed staff that will be there all day, every day, working with the interns, but also working with your staff. And that, I think, makes us somewhat unique, that we are assisting our young people to be independent because we're not one-on-one, but at the same time providing the support that they need to be independent workers.
And what was the first, do you remember the first state that you went into?
Well, Tennessee and Georgia, Vanderbilt started a program about 15 years ago that wasn't exactly like ProjectSEARCH, but now is a ProjectSEARCH site. And Emory Midtown Hospital in Atlanta and Seattle Children's in Seattle were our first out of Ohio replications.
Okay. And then what was the first, and how did it happen, the first other country that became involved and showed interest?
Well, England, we got an inquiry from an organization in England called Remploy that had actually started after World War II that was looking at ways to reintroduce veterans back into work. And then they kind of nuanced into people with disabilities. And they had a lot of workshops or kind of standalone institutions that were expensive. And the UK government said, you've got to find ways to reintegrate these people into regular work, not all these standalones. And so they did a lot of research and said, well, what are some of the better transition programs out there? And they contacted us and they said, we've heard great things about ProjectSEARCH. We want you to come and teach us how you do this. And so we went to the UK and we had a contract with Her Majesty's government, which was pretty fun, and started 10 or 15 programs in the UK. And now we have, 60 plus programs in the UK and beyond.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it was pretty exciting to go to. In 2007, I think, was our first time to go to the UK. Okay. Yeah.
And so I'm looking at some of the numbers from last year, right? Just to put things in perspective. So it says last year you had 3,733 enrolled internationally, right? Of course. 3,511 completed the program, and 2,357 were employed. And then you have 2 separate definitions of employment. So first of all, we have to just talk about, again, to put things in perspective, we're talking about individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, where 77.3% of them are working. Like at this point in time, you're getting close to the general population. And for those who aren't from the disability community, the national average for competitive employment, which is what you're talking about, at least minimum wage in the community, completely integrated, is closer to 13 or 14%. And you have a program that is producing 77.3%. So what are your 2 different definitions of employment?
So the 77% right now is people with any kind of a job. So that's still competitive. I mean, still making minimum wage, but under 16 hours. Okay. And then the 67% is 16 hours a week or more, minimum wage or better, in an integrated environment and non-seasonal. So somebody that just didn't get a job for the holidays or the summer. Because when we first started, we'd get a lot of young people, especially who got a summer job, and we'd count that without realizing that, that job was going to go away.
Right, in 2 or 3 months.
In 2 or 3 months. So that's why the discrepancy between the two data points is the 77% is students that got any kind of employment, but then the 67% is that more rigorous definition of 16 hours a week or more, minimum wage or better in an integrated environment and non-seasonal. So right now our average hours a week are 25 if you take everybody, and over $10 an hour if you take everybody. And we think that hourly wage will go way up this year just because with Amazon at a minimum of $15 an hour, everybody's kind of jumping to that as a minimum. So I think that minimum hourly wage will go way up.
Right.
What we really want is that weekly hourly amount to go up, because most of us couldn't survive on 16 hours a week of work.
And another thing, I just want to throw this in there because we're about to jump into a completely different area is, I've heard you speak several times, and it's extremely important that employers know that this program is not looking for charity in any way. You want them to hire people who are going to benefit the company. So was that always your vision from the very beginning?
Always. It was never philanthropic, because you could do that lots of other ways. And there are already workshops and all of those kinds of employment opportunities if you didn't need it to be competitive. We have always said we want the work to be complex and systematic, and we want the students to learn competitive, marketable, transferable skills. And I think employers like that because it's what we all need. And especially in this day and age when unemployment is so low, that we have to be able to give employers somebody who is going to do the work in a way that meets expectations. So when we talk about setting up internships, we have to make sure that one of the first things we talk to every manager about is what are typical entry-level tasks, and then what are your expectations of those tasks. So I always think of a table with 4 columns. What's the task? What's the quality that you are expecting? What's the productivity rate of another typical entry-level employee? And then what are any safety concerns or any kind of side notes that you would think about when you have that task? Such as in a hospital, we always have to think about patients are first. Patients and families are first. So are our interns going to interact with patients and families? What do they have to do to be socially appropriate, greeting, all of those kinds of things? Whereas at a company like Fifth Third, it's confidential information. How do I keep the information that I'm touching, entering, scanning, confidential? So those are those kind of cultural norms, cultural notes that you have to think about. So we want every of our employers, but also every one of our managers to know that that's at our forefront too. Hospitality has been a big industry lately that we've been in. And here in Tennessee, we're in places like the Wilderness, in the Smokies, in the Sevier County area, 2 very prestigious hotels in Memphis, hotel in Murfreesboro, the Embassy Suites in Nashville. So when we think about the culture of hospitality, the first thing is guests, right? How do we interact with our guests and keep our guests happy? And then the second probably is safety and cleanliness. So how do we infuse that into every single internship? Because if we're not safe, clean, and hospitable, well, then the hotel doesn't need you. So we have to think about what's important to every industry sector. How can we work that into every single internship that we have?
So we talked about changing culture from within. So of course, our leadership decided this is something we want to dedicate ourselves to. We're excited to bring these interns on board. But then the leaders of different departments volunteered their department. But then the boots on the ground individuals were a little bit hesitant, some of them. Some were very excited. And so we did a training on working with individuals with disability. And the relief that comes over them when they are taught, you are to treat them like everybody else. Like, you are not to baby them. You're not to talk to them like they're children. If they do something wrong, you're supposed to let them know they did something wrong. So those expectations, to know that this is a true internship with high expectations. It is not charity. And they just felt so much better about the whole program. Like, just walking out of that training, they just felt better. So I just think it's important for people to know that this, like you said, this is not something that, we're looking for a handout or something. These are hardworking, extremely talented and gifted individuals.
Right. One of our challenges sometimes, especially at children's hospitals, even though they're fabulous organizations, sometimes the interns that come in have been patients there. Mm-hmm. And so some of the doctors and nurses know them as patients, and they start to relate to them as patients instead of as interns. And so we have to shift that mindset that little Nave isn't little Nave anymore. Right. Now he's grown up Nave who wants to go to work. So we have to treat him as if he wants to go to work. So and knowing that, it's hard for them to flip those expectations sometimes. Mm-hmm. And they've admitted that. And that's the benefit of going to some place like Blue Cross Blue Shield, because they don't know any of the interns. They don't have those preconceived notions of knowing them as maybe a young child or a young patient. But yes, we want every department to have the same high expectations that you would of a new employee walking in the door. And if they can do that, that's half the battle right there.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to finish up with talking about you a little bit. For those of you who have never met Susie, she's full of energy and personality and passion and amazingly articulate. And I would like to know what kind of a person you were as a young woman, like, let's say college age. Were you like a person that was out there trying to change the world? Were you... Who was young Susie?
That's a great question. No one's ever asked me that before. I think one of the defining parts of my young career, actually in high school, I wanted to join a club at my school that did service to the community. And there was an announcement on the PA system that if you wanted to join this program, you could come to Mr. Truxell's room. Mm-hmm. So I went up there and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I want to join Key Club." And he goes, "Well, you can't." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he goes, "You're a girl." And I'm like,
wow.
Yeah. He goes, "Well, this club's only for boys." I said, "Really? You're only going to let boys do community service and not girls?" He said, "Well, it's prestigious. It's this, it's that. It's tradition." I said,
wow.
Okay. So I started my own service club called SKIP, Student Community Involvement Program. Uh-huh. And pretty soon we had more members than his damn Key Club. So there you go.
And it was a mixed club.
Of course it was a mixed club.
You didn't create like a female version.
No. You have to have guys too. It was
exactly.
fun. It was fun.
That is amazing. And then what drew you to this population? Or when did you start working with individuals with a disability?
Well, actually, that same club, we started working at a state institution in Dayton, Ohio, who all of the young people were wards of the court. And they were very seriously disabled. Okay. And I couldn't begin to tell you stories of the young people. And keep in mind, please keep in mind, this was a long time ago.
Okay.
In the 1970s. But it made you shudder to think about some of the conditions, and the fact that they had nobody. They were wards of the court. I would go on Saturdays and you'd think, well, surely mom or dad's going to visit today. Mm-hmm. Or surely a grandma or grandpa's going to come. But they had no one. No one ever came to visit. No one ever came to feed them. So I had always wanted to be a teacher, mm-hmm. but now the focus changed. It's like, well, now I have to help people with disabilities because they had nobody. Oh. At least this population had nobody. Right. And so then I went into special ed.
Awesome.
So.
That's a great story.
I've never been asked that story before.
No?
And I don't think I've ever told anybody that story before.
Both of those we've heard so far have been great. You travel a lot. Obviously, you travel like you give technical support all over the state, all over the country. It's hard work. And I've seen, there are times where all of us are frustrated in any of our jobs. So, like, what do you do to decompress?
I exercise. I love to get outside and walk or run or inside or wherever. You have to make your own adventures when you travel because most of the time you're traveling by yourself. And for an extrovert like me, you need some outlets, and you can't just wallow in the fact that you're by yourself all the time. So you have to kind of get out and see the thing. I'll tell you a quick story. I was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota in January one year, and it was cold, cold, cold. They had just had a lot of snow, and I'd never been to Sioux Falls before, and I was by myself. And so I went to the front desk of the hotel and said, "Where can I take a run that's safe?" And she said, "You're right by the falls." And I said, "What do you mean the falls?" And she goes, "You're in Sioux Falls." And I went, "I've never been here. Where are the falls?" She goes, "Go out of the hotel, turn left. You'll find them in about half a mile." I'm like, okay. And they were beautiful because they were all frozen and there were all kinds of people there walking around, and it was absolutely gorgeous. But I never would have done that if I hadn't asked the very nice person at the front desk.
Yes. And I commend your dedication to running out in cold weather, because I would have been, where's the closest treadmill at? So where it's nice and warm. So few silly questions. Favorite vacation?
Oh, wow. New Zealand.
New Zealand. Oh, I hear it's absolutely like the Garden of Eden.
Picture perfect. Every turn is beautiful. People are nice. Pretty progressive, very integrated, very excited about people with disabilities, and it's gorgeous.
And do you have a favorite book or movie?
Oh, The Poisonwood Bible was one of my favorite books of all time.
Okay.
It's about the 1960s, and a Southern Baptist minister takes his family to Africa on a mission trip, and just kind of what happens to them, told from the children's perspective. It's really fascinating.
And the last one, you are in front of people a lot. I have met you, 5 times. And when you see somebody in a setting like a training, or even going out to dinner after the training, you have a sense that you know them, even though you don't, right? We have this, so there are like literally probably a couple thousand people across this world that are like, I know Susie. But what is something that would surprise us about you?
I have 3 grandchildren that I love.
Oh, I did not know that. Are they in Ohio?
No.
Okay.
2 are in Asheville, and 1 is in a little town in Michigan called Luna Pier.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for you and Aaron's brilliant minds for coming up with this and having, as I said, the audacity to follow through with it. And I'm sure there were some bumps in the road and people who turned their noses up, but you guys kept pushing, and now you're literally thousands of people every year are going through this program that you developed. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
This has been lots of fun, actually. This is great.
Oh, good. Go enjoy some of Smyrna. It should be noted that there's an adult version of Project Search for individuals already out of high school. If you are interested in establishing an internship site or would like additional information, please visit their website at projectsearch.us. That's ProjectSearch, all one word, .us. Thank you for listening, and hope you tune in to the next episode, where I'll be speaking to Emma Dillard, a speaker and peer advocate who discusses living with the dual diagnosis of major depression and alcohol addiction. We'll see you then.